Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. And yes, that sort of came out back to front, but never mind. We're all real round here. Welcome to this week's Gift of Healing TV. I'm Sarah Jane, your hostess, and I have great pleasure in welcoming this week Richard Ellis, who's going to be discussing with us the heart of Reiki. And for those of you who've watched the programs before, you'll know that I love Reiki, and so this is very definitely a one for me, and I hope that you will all actually enjoy it as well and learn something from it. I'm going to start by introducing Richard to you. Richard Ellis is the author of 3 books on Reiki and a complementary health practitioner specializing in the relationship between mind and body. He is a teacher of Reiki, a clinical hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, and a teacher of 5-element Qigong. And I hope I've said that right. Richard's career in complementary therapies began in the early 1990s, completing his training as a Reiki instructor in early 1995. He then continued to work alongside his teacher, June Woods, whilst living at the Findhorn Foundation in Scotland. Following a period of travel and international teaching, he was approached to write his first book, Empower Your Life with Reiki, published by Hodder and Stoughton in 1999. It was also published in the United States by Sterling Publishing and retitled Practical Reiki, going on to be translated into several languages. Following the success of Practical Reiki, he started work on his second book, Reiki and the 7 Chakras, published in 2002 by Vermilion. It has been translated into several languages and has sold over 40,000 copies in the English language. His keen interest in the chakra system, the nature of disease, and the link between mind and body has led him to develop his own training program utilizing posture analysis and non-verbal communication called The Body Never Lies. Richard runs his healing practice from East Dorset, England, where he lives with his family, and not that far from where I live, as it turns out. Richard, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Sarah. How are you?
I'm well, as could be expected with this bug that's been going around, but it's great to have you here, and I've really been looking forward to this.
Yeah, well, me too. And I'm glad the wind is sort of slowly, dissipated a little bit, because it was a bit blowy in my cabin this evening. So hopefully you can hear me okay.
We can hear you beautifully, and yes, I know what you mean about the wind. It's been very blustery here, so I've got windows and everything shut in my room so that we're not getting the rattle of doors, etc. So welcome. We have a number of people who've joined us already. Well, whoa, and this is shooting off down. I've
got to say hello to Uzi from Switzerland and Eloise.
Yes, yeah, here, absolutely. Catriona, Dawn's here. Dawn's somebody that I know. She's in London. We've got several. Oh, right. I'm assuming we've got a little group here.
They're talking to each other.
So yeah. So we have a whole load of people watching. And please, folks. And I know we've got a lady from France as well. I saw her name come up. So that's brilliant. She's with us, one of our regulars. Folks, please, great for letting us know you're here. That's excellent. Thank you. If you have any questions about Reiki, please do put your questions up, because I would love to ask your questions rather than necessarily the ones we've got listed here, because this is your program. And so we want to be able to answer your questions. We may have the right questions for you, but if we don't, let's have your questions. So Richard, let's start by you sharing a little bit about how you came to Reiki.
Yeah, of course. It's quite a long story. I'll see if I can make it brief for you. I was, after leaving art college, I was working in London as a photographer in the fashion and music industry. and to all intents and purposes, just enjoying ticking along and doing what I planned to do with my life. But then destiny seemed to intervene in my process. And one day I met this chap at a party who was going out with the makeup artist that I was working with at the time. And he was from the Findhorn community in Scotland, a spiritual community up there. Anyway, I found this guy absolutely fascinating, and it didn't take him a lot to convince me that I should go up to Findhorn and visit sometime. So I booked into a week's experience week up there, which basically means you pay, you go up and you experience the community and community life, and you work, and they call it karma yoga, and basically get involved in all aspects of community life. My first impressions of this was that everyone was a bunch of hippies, and you know, I'd come from London and I just was full of judgment about the whole thing, to be honest. But after about 2 or 3 days, it started working on me, and I found myself becoming more open, emotionally connected. And on about the 3rd day, a group of people said, "Oh, come up to this hill. It's called Venus Hill, behind the community. It's known to be quite a well-known power center up there, part of a landscape temple." And of course, I had no idea about this at the time. So sort of naively, I went up to the top of this hill with 15 other people, and I had an experience, a very powerful energetic experience, where energy was surging through my body, through my feet. I could feel chakras spinning in my body. And after a while, I just said, you know, you've got to take me out of here. You've got to take me down from here. And I just felt like I was purging a huge amount of emotion at the time. So this experience for me personally raised loads of questions about the nature of reality, my own beliefs about things, and I had to go out and find some answers, really, because suddenly living in London as a fashion photographer in this very blinkered world was no longer really relevant to me. So one thing led to another, and I met a lovely lady called June Woods, who's a Reiki teacher up in Scotland. She lived in the Findhorn community behind the nature sanctuary up there. And June was one of the very early Reiki teachers in this country. She was trained in the mid to late 80s. Very simple approach to Reiki. So I met this lady, and it was really the beginning of making sense of the experience I'd had up on the hill energetically. And I never looked back, really. I just knew as soon as I first placed my hand over somebody that this was for me. I was absolutely blown away by what I felt, what I experienced at the time. In fact, I thought June was doing it at first. You know, I was so naive about all these things. And her motto was always just relax and let it flow. Just let Reiki inform you. And her approach was very simplistic. Really just let Reiki be your teacher, give you the experience of the energy, and then let the energy guide you and lead you. And for me, it worked really, really well. And to this day, I try and incorporate the same kind of approach and philosophy with my own students. So that's kind of how it all started. Yeah.
Brilliant. And for all of us, everyone that's ever experienced Reiki, it's our own story, and it is about our story. It isn't about anybody else's story. And one of the most important things that I was taught, and yes, my own master again keeps it simple, which I love, that's the love of it to me, is the simplicity, was it's about self. The first level is about self. So what have you learnt, you know, through the practice of Reiki on yourself?
Well, like you say, I think, you know, that you go through these different levels, and I think a lot of people misunderstand that, and they think that the different levels represent in some ways different levels of energy that you can transmit. And I don't think that's why they're there at all. I think the different levels are there as markers, really. You know, they give you a certain amount of knowledge and information, and then you get given an attunement to accompany that part of the journey. And so Reiki 1 is really about, as you say, form a connection to the universe, to this universal energy. And for most people, this is the first time that they've had this connection since, well, the first time they can consciously remember being connected to the universe again. And it's quite a profound experience for many, many people, and it happens in lots of different ways. People experience it in loads of different ways. But from a very simple initiation process, people are left with this deep sense of connection. Then as we progress through the different levels of Reiki, second level introduces the concept that, we can modify our thought processes, we can question our beliefs, be mindful of the way we're thinking, be mindful of what we're feeling, and maybe make adjustments to our lifestyle choices. So really allowing this energy to come in at a deeper level and start to release some of the baggage and some of the emotional journey of our life, so that we can in some way grow, mature, and develop as in a sense of self. And then finally, the third level is really, for me, the understanding that we are it. We are that energy. And for me, Reiki is everything. We are Reiki, Reiki is us. And so the final level is that understanding that we are it, we are Reiki, and we can hopefully embody that if we can get out of our own way as much as possible.
Yep, it's about getting out of our own way. I remember my own teacher, the level 1, when I was learning, and she sort of went up to the side of one of the other students and she put a hand on their shoulder and she said, Reiki on, Reiki off. And I suppose that is it, isn't it? It's actually, it's never off. Once you've received it, it's never off.
No, absolutely. It's in fact, Reiki's always there. It is the universal energy. And I think, you asked me, what did I learn most about the whole process? I think for me, it's the fact that we're intimately connected at all times to the universe. And I'd go so far as to say, we're part of its unfolding story. It's like it's an epic adventure, this universe, as it expands and unfolds and expresses itself. And through Reiki, I personally have understood myself to be part of that unfolding. And I find that a really beautiful analogy, a beautiful idea, that the universe is expressing through me and through all of us. And it also helps me to understand in many ways how I'm from the earth, and it's not a spirituality that I'm reaching up and trying to develop myself and become more spiritual. It's much more an evolving from the earth. I'm both the physicality and I'm spirit, and it's this sort of meeting of the two aspects of myself that is a really important part of that journey. So that's probably what it's taught me the most, is the interconnection that I have with everything out there, which helps me to have compassion for it all as well, because it's a bit of a mad place sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And it is that the more, and it helps you to connect with yourself. I think because so many of us are disconnected from ourselves, experiences in life and people's comments, people's judgments that we've allowed to affect us, disconnect us from ourselves. And part of my own journey, Reiki was a really big part of helping me to reconnect to me.
And it's which part of you, I suppose, it's the important thing. Rather than getting caught up in all the dramas and the distractions of day-to-day life and social media, and it's a wonderful technology, and here we are, but it's really interesting how distracted we can become with all that, and in some way very sort of drawn into a very detailed aspect of life that is quite removed from reality in many ways. And as opposed to walking outside into the garden and looking at the night sky and going, oh my God, look at that, isn't that incredible? The vastness of it all. So yeah, it's which part of us we're connecting to is an important question.
And I think that the part that we're connecting to is that true part, that heart, that our soul, our spirit, the aspect of ourself we should be listening to. And we've, it's ego versus heart. It's head versus heart. And I think that if you listen to your heart, you really are connecting with the heart of everything, the heart of Reiki. And you actually, I didn't, sorry, that was not
nice plug, thank you.
It was not a pun, folks, but it is. Reiki is the heart. It's the heart of Reiki. And that makes so much sense to me, that it is helping you to connect to the perfect being that you were born. And it is the outside influences that have affected that. And what the Reiki does is help you to reconnect with the true you.
Yes, and I think that it does it so beautifully simply by just offering a flow and teaching us to be mindful of what really stands in the way of that flow. Whether it's our belief systems, whether it's negative thought processes, whether it's emotional baggage that we carry from our childhood, whatever it is, it's basically gives us a space where we can observe ourselves and become mindful of what's standing in the way of flow. And then the journey of Reiki is very simple. It's just about really becoming as empty as possible and surrendering to that flow and offering, in a sense, those parts of us that are not whole, not healed, to Reiki to be transformed and changed. So it's that really simplistic and wonderfully beautiful way of working that I love. So when someone comes in to have a treatment, for example, what I see, it probably like yourself as a practitioner, is you see the potentiality, and you also see everything that stands in the way of that potentiality. And really, maybe like a sculptor, you just chip away all the bits that aren't part of their wholeness, and give them the opportunity to reflect upon that and release it with Reiki energy.
That leads me perfectly actually into the next question, because I'm actually one of these people that don't see things, that don't hear things. And if I get anything, which the majority of the occasions I don't, it's a knowing, it's an intuition, but there's nothing more than that. And I've always worked with Reiki. I've known from almost the outset, this is what I'm meant to be doing. Mm-hmm. I don't need to know why. I don't need to know what's going on with the people that are drawn to come to me. I just trust that I open the channel and I let their higher self, their body, whatever, do with the energy what is totally right for them. And I'm detached from the outcome, because it's got to be what's right for them. If they're looking for a specific, I can't give that to them, because that may not be for their highest good at this point in time. There is something more important. But what would you say to those people who, and I know I've just said I'm one of them, who have just done this out of total trust and belief that they're doing it, because they don't feel, they don't see, they maybe in a lot of cases don't know why?
Well, I'm very much in your camp actually there, Sarah, because when I first studied Reiki, I studied with a lady who saw everything. She had the archangel standing behind her, thunder and lightning and all this going on, and all I felt was just a great sense of coming home and a wonderful sense of calmness and peace enter me, and a knowing, like you said, this sort of deep sense of knowing. So I was a bit sort of unsure as to whether I was doing Reiki properly, because I wasn't seeing all this stuff when I first started, and I didn't know what that was all about. And I meet a lot of people who are the same, and it's almost as if the emphasis in Reiki practices has become about being able to see these things and experience these things intuitively. And I prefer really a much more grounded approach to Reiki, which is, lie on the table, use your common sense, listen to your intuition. It'll tell you if it needs to tell you something, and in your own unique way. Some people feel things, some people might hear things, some people observe things. And generally I've found with working with Reiki, my client knows more about their particular issue than I do. Now, whether they know that consciously or unconsciously, it's there. And if I can be really observant and present in the situation, then generally what happens is the client will show me in some non-verbal way what the issue is. Now, that could be they point to a particular area of their body, or the tonality of their voice, or certain stiffness and tightness in a particular part of their body. And just generally, you kind of, through practice, get a sense of where they are. But at the end of the day, even if you're in the completely wrong place, the beauty of Reiki is it'll go to where it's needed anyway. So in a sense, the beauty of doing something like scanning by some Reiki Ho, as they call it in Japanese, is as you're running your hands around the area, if you don't necessarily have a clue of where you're supposed to go, what you will generally get a sense of is when energy is flowing and when energy is not flowing. If it's flowing all the time, that's great. But most people will experience, more sense of heat in a particular area of the body than another area of the body. Well, let that be the beginning of the treatment. Let that be the starting point. Let that be the indicator of where energy is required. And just keep it as simple as that. And then maybe a bit like the universe unfolding, the healing unfolds as well, and it'll take you somewhere else. But I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of very great practitioners. In fact, one of my students who sees all sorts of stuff, and I marvel at her capacity and her ability. But I don't, unfortunately, like yourself.
and I think, do you know, the joy is the practice is pure and simple, and we all develop our own way of working with it. It's not a matter of trying to force it, to distort it, to do anything with it. It's our way of working with it. And I'm very different to you. The scanning thing, because I don't feel heat from my hands or cold from my hands, my clients may feel it, but I don't. So it isn't a matter of me being able to put my hands over somebody and say, you need it here, because I'm not meant to do that. The one thing I have accepted from the absolute outset, I just have to do it all on trust. I talk about opening the channel. I open the channel and I let the session happen. Whether I move down the body or not, stay put, move totally away and stay seated in the room, depending on the feeling I get. And sometimes I have literally felt as if other beings have wished to be there and they've almost said to me, out the way. And I've honored that. And I think that's what is so beautiful about this. It isn't just the energies of Reiki, because you said about, sort of the archangels, etc. I just trust, I invite the angels of that individual, the guides of that individual in to support them. And sometimes absolutely they come in. So Reiki is, and that's why people are drawn to different practitioners, because you've got to go to the one that's totally right for you. Absolutely.
And I'm sort of a very grounded practitioner in the sense that it's sort of warts and all Reiki. You come along and we look at why the body's holding that energy and those patterns, and what we can do to release that, and what changes need to take place. Whereas you say other people will go to someone who maybe externalizes that intuition, and it's an archangel that gives those messages, or it's a guide that gives that message. For me, I suppose my philosophy or the learning I've had is that if I'm intimately connected to everything, everywhere in this universe, which in a sense is what the second level and the distant healing symbol is all about, then I don't need to externalize my intuition. I don't need it to be a Roman soldier standing over there or a guide standing over there. It can be part of me. And the beauty of that approach is then you learn a little bit about the way that you personally work with the energy, or the way that the energy works through you. And that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it be true to what works for you.
Process, yeah.
by others. And we've got a couple of comments. Eloise says, it's really interesting. I never used to feel anything when I first started learning, and I feel over time I've been opened, and now I feel tingling in the hands, and I get pain in my body where Reiki is needed. I also wait for movement. I sometimes have the feeling my hands are being moved. And I think yeah, a lot of people can relate to that, can't they, Richard?
Absolutely. And you know, I've over the years, and I've been teaching now for 20 years, this month actually, and I've never met someone who can't feel. Sometimes people block that, or they have a belief system that prevents that happening, or they doubt it and they get in the way of that process. But I've never ever met someone who can't feel, and it's really just a question of showing how. So I believe everybody can feel, and everybody can scan, and everyone can experience that on some level. And I think Eloise, it's is a case in point. You know, at the beginning she maybe didn't, and then she developed that capacity within herself.
Brilliant. And then we've got Catriona, who says, getting very frustrated at seeing all the different, whoops, that clicked down, symbols around. Don't mind them being shown per se, but why so many? And I think this is brilliant. Let's take this into because originally it was verbal. It was an oral tradition. The symbols were not to be written down. If you wrote them down, it was just to help you memorize them, and then they had to be destroyed. And as for writing books and putting the symbols in them and sharing them, you know, that was not how this whole thing started. Yet I know that in the heart of Reiki, which I do have here, thank you, and I have been really enjoying reading, that you are sharing the symbols, but I know that people have shared them long before you did.
Yeah, that was a difficult decision for me to take, and I had to really reflect upon the reasons why I was doing that. The symbols have actually been in the public domain since, I think, 1992. A guy called A.J. Mackenzie published a book with the symbols in 1992. So they've been in the public domain a long time. There's also some confusion about which are the original Reiki symbols and which aren't. And there's a lot of symbols out there, as the lady, is it Katrina who said?
Yes.
She mentioned.
Yeah.
So I think I felt it was important to put the symbols into the book that were the symbols as drawn by Hawaii Takata. So they're in her own hand for a start. And that's a really nice thing to see for people. And if they've been in the public domain for such a long time and there's a lot of confusion around them, I felt it was quite an important thing to clarify what those symbols were. But they also existed prior to their inclusion in Reiki, as far as research shows. So my decision about including them in the book was really to do with how I was discussing them. I was very interested in discussing those symbols as archetypes that once again reflected this notion that certain spiritual ideas were found right across the world, and we see the same symbology in all sorts of different beliefs and faiths. And I was really interested in talking about that and how Reiki echoed many other spiritual disciplines throughout the world, and those symbols are found in all these different spiritual systems as well. So even the Dalai Lama will represent those symbols as objects, but they'll be the same. It's the same symbology or the same idea that's being presented, but rather than squiggles on a piece of paper, there'll be objects that he uses, but they say the same thing. And that's why they had to be included for me.
And I must admit, I'm really enjoying. I'm not the world's best reader or fastest reader, but I'm fascinated by what you've written there about them, and I'm really enjoying reading that aspect. I'm enjoying the book, but this aspect about the symbols and the greater meanings and the fact that they do come, because that things have been around for so many years. They really have. You know, this Reiki is not modern. It's been around in some form or another probably for all life. Actually, it is just who helped us to first connect with it, to realize it. And we were probably more attuned to it back in our very early days than as we came into modern times, because we seemed to lose it, and we got disconnected almost from the earth.
Well, I think that's an important point, from the earth. And in many ways I talk about the symbols because as a treasure map that Yasui left for us, like with all these little clues, because he found it, and he had the empowerment, the realization, the enlightenment on the top of Mount Kurama. And then he left it for us to see if we could find it ourselves. And at its very simplistic level, it is that we are from the earth and we are from spirit. And it's through the purification of the poisons within ourself and the ascension, in a sense, of ourself, as we rise up to meet the heavenly aspect of ourselves, that we find our true nature in the heart. That's the meeting place. And the symbols represent that as a journey. I think I even end up back in the Garden of Eden at one point, and talking about how, the tree in the Garden of Eden is exactly the same symbology. The snake whirling around the tree, and the fruits of the apple tree being the same as the flowering of our own knowledge on the journey. So yeah, it's an interesting journey. I mean, I learned a lot doing it, to be honest.
Yeah. Brilliant. We've got I think, forgive my pronunciation, is it Lisha or Lisha? It says, why is it that a lot of us can feel quite throaty whilst giving a Reiki treatment?
Well, I don't know if a lot of us do feel quite throaty giving a Reiki treatment, but maybe Lisha does. I would say that that is much more to do with, if we look at it from a chakra point of view, the throat is really a point of expression. And if you're working with somebody and it's an emotional energy that needs to be expressed, then it's quite likely that when you're working with that client, not only will they need to express it, but because your energy's merged with them, that so will you at some point. It's not uncommon for the practitioner to be emotional as well as the person receiving it, which is quite an interesting part of Reiki. That quite often as practitioners, we think it's us that give the treatment to the client, but actually what I've experienced, that there's no you or me in the treatment, there's just us. And it's us being in Reiki that allows something magical to happen. A little bit like, I suppose, a musician and its instrument. If they're separate, then there can be no real music played. So it's the combination of the instrument and the musician that allows something to happen. So it's the combination of the client and the practitioner becoming one that allows something amazing to happen in a healing session.
And I must admit, if my throat start going, or one of my chakras is affected, then I will say to the individual afterwards, I felt some energy at that particular point. Most people with me, it's the lower chakras, it's area of childhood, or something like that. But then that's the different people that will come to you. The right people for you, the people that you can help will be the people that can come to you. And sometimes it is about mentioning something. So somebody's throat to me, I would just say, is there something you're not admitting to yourself or you're not saying to somebody? And just leave it with them. I don't need the answer. Just go with that.
Just the need for expression or space. I mean, the throat is where we vocalize personal space and boundaries. So, if it is an inner child issue and there's a need for some boundaries to be put in place, then the throat would be a place where we vocalize that. But now we're getting into a whole new area. and maybe it's better just to sort of stand there and let Reiki flow and sort it out, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, Daphne, so I hope that has answered your question. Daphne says, Richard's research and writing about the symbols affirms our interconnectedness. It is fascinating and joins all faiths and beliefs in unconditional universal love and provides us an understanding of the oneness and the spirit within us all. Brilliant book and writing.
It's really lovely to hear. Thank you. Love you too.
Okay. Now, I know we talked about a little bit of an exercise, but folks, please, if you've got more questions, please let's ask them for Richard, because although I know we're getting very fully booked with the programs, we can always bring Richard back if he'd like to come back, because what I love this topic, and it's not something that can be covered in 45 minutes. So, and I know I've got a couple more questions here, but I would like guests to ask as well. One of the things, we possibly mentioned before was, can Reiki help to increase or awaken psychic abilities within practitioners?
Well, I mean, psychic abilities is one of those sort of grey areas again. It's I just sort of question, in a sense, why we need to emphasize that once again. I do believe that sensitivity is increased. The more empty we are, then the more sensitive we are to flow. And if that flow is where information exists and intelligence exists, the Reiki flow I'm talking about, then it makes sense that if we're open and empty to receiving that information and that intelligence, and we'll be guided by it. To label that psychic, it doesn't seem relevant to me. I think it's just really about building an intimate relationship to the energy itself that's important.
So really, we should be calling it opening to our intuition and trusting our intuition.
Yeah.
And guidance in the form of intuition, rather than referring to it as being psychic.
Yeah, because I suppose when someone says psychic, it's almost like we're going out of ourselves for information, and the word intuition is to be taught from within. That's what it means, to be tuition from within. So I'm a great believer in that. Just give the person the connection, and help them develop that connection, and then allow that energy and that connection to flower and flourish, and eventually there's no difference between the energy and the person. They just become it, when they're doing Reiki. And that's the beauty, in a sense, of the practice, is the more that you use the practice, the more that you give treatment, the more you become in tune with that energy, the more that you merge with that energy. It gives you a clue how to act when you're not in that healing space, in the rest of your life. Let's take that outside into the rest of your life and see if you can become that all the time.
Brilliant. Catriona says, Richard, you write about the chakras being misaligned and rebalancing those above the problem. So wouldn't it be better to start a treatment at the base rather than at the crown?
Well, good question. I think traditionally Reiki's taught where you start at the head and you work your way down. But when you intuitively work with Reiki, then you may find you start, at the right knee or the right hip. I know you and I have talked about this before, Sarah, that the positions are really given as training wheels. They give you a format, and they make sense, and there's a flow to them. And in many ways, it's a useful flow, because if you can give Reiki to the person's head first, the crown and the third eye areas, then it gives them an opportunity to move into a nice, deep, relaxed space, so that you can then work through the rest of the body. So it makes sense. It's logical. However, when working more intuitively with Reiki, you may find as you scan that you pick up an area lower down in the body, and you really can't move from there, and that's where the whole thing is beginning. So my advice would be just to experiment with it, and be as playful as you can with it, and let the energy direct you.
Yeah, I must admit, I teach my students, it's while you're at the lower levels, especially level 1, follow the hand positions, just follow the teaching. As you grow, as you progress, then, and you will be in that place to follow your intuition, follow it, and go with it. But to me, level 1 not only is about yourself, but it's about teaching you a respect of the Reiki, so that you work with it. You're not trying to force it, you're not trying to give it, you're not trying to do all these things that Reiki isn't about.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, going back to the chakra system, which I know is in many people's view isn't really part of the original system of Reiki, because the Japanese don't have the chakra system, they have the hara system, and just the Seika Tanden, which is the lower energy center. So it's a completely different philosophy. But if you look at it from the point of view of the chakra system, the energy flows in both directions. And quite often emotional energy in the lower chakras needs to move up to be expressed, and energy that maybe is toxic needs to go and be grounded and be composted by the earth. So, energy is always going to move in both directions. And if you cover the body, you'll generally get it right.
I just offer it to the body and let the body do with it. It knows exactly, Okay, Leisha says, it's funny because the idea of Reiki opening any psychic channels within me made me nervous, and I asked after my first attunement that any of the guides or angels would show up in a way that wouldn't frighten the socks off me. I'm happy to feel guided in an intuitive way. And I think that's what we've just said. It's not about psychic, it's about the intuition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point. I mean, if suddenly you start seeing things that scare the life out of you, it's going to be counterproductive. So, I think it's a gentler, and it seems to be a more honest way of working, just to allow flow to direct, your practice as much as possible. And it also then leads you to having some responsibility about that, about allowing that flow, because if there's no room for that energy to flow through you, then you're not going to be a great vehicle for flow. So part of the practice is, work on the self, allow, a greater space for that energy to flow through if possible.
Which leads us perfectly to the question, or the comment that Eloise has just, when doing a treatment, would you agree you don't necessarily need, I apologize, it's Daphne. How important is self-healing in supporting you spiritually and as a practitioner? And so, of course, we've just commented that about self-healing being important.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the anchor to the practice. And in my opinion, all healing is self-healing. I think in many ways what Reiki offers you is, as we said at the very beginning, an opportunity to be mindful about your life choices. Certainly for me, my life's completely different to how it was before I ever did Reiki, and I see that same thing happening with most of the students that come through. They'll suddenly decide that certain behavior isn't a reflection of who they want to be anymore, and so self-healing gives you that opportunity to reflect and to make changes and to be as open as you can to that flow. And I think also when someone's been really open to flow, if they find themselves closing down in some way or getting angry, I mean, this is part of what the principles is about. If you find yourself getting angry, then that's saying to you that something's not right in your world, and maybe you need to reflect upon that and make changes, move away from that.
And I think there's a lot of people, I know it's changed my life out of all recognition. It really has. That's the joy of it to me. And this is the question I started reading and then realized I'd missed one. When doing a treatment, would you agree you don't necessarily need to put your hands in a specific place? Reiki will flow where it's needed to. To me, absolutely.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I think that then the next stage of that, there's something really interesting happens. Is if you are part of that flow, then you will be moved where you are needed as well. So this is part of the joy in a way of working intuitively. Is yes, you can place your hands in specific areas, and you can follow that structure, and then you can allow yourself to be more free in your approach to the treatment and see where that takes you, knowing and trusting that energy will flow where it's needed anyway, regardless of where you are in the positions on the body. And then ultimately that you will be moved where you're needed. And that's a really interesting way of working. I think it was Eloise who talked about pain in her hands and being able to feel where energy is needed now, because she's getting the indications in her own body empathetically. And that's a really sort of quite enhanced way of working.
And I think the more you work with Reiki on yourself and with others, because that was also the joy when I was taught. It was, well, when of course you open the Reiki channel for somebody else, and I don't actually like the term giving a session, but I appreciate that's about the only term you can use. So when you're giving a session, you actually receive some for yourself. So that's fine by me.
Yeah. And in a way, that's part of the beauty of the practice is, when you're working every day with people, it's also a mindful meditative practice for yourself, and there's a flow through you at the same time. So, it's a wonderful practice in that sense.
We are actually coming very much to the end of this, but one thing you commented was about raising the question about protection, because I know a lot of people think about the fact that they have to protect themselves. So maybe we better debate this the last question, unless somebody else has got something they really would like to ask. So your feelings on protection? Well,
what I find quite interesting about the idea of protection is we invest an awful lot of time and energy into opening ourselves up. And when we're open, we feel absolutely fantastic. So the idea that we need to close down again seems counterintuitive in some sense. And the way and the methods which are in place for a lot of protection seems to be about placing some kind of barrier between us and whatever it is that we determine isn't healthy for us. A negative energy, a dark energy, something that might cause us harm. And I see that just really as a reflection of the idea of a polarized universe. If I'm light, then there must be dark out there. So I'm deciding I'm light and I need protecting and from this dark energy out there. But if we're all one, if we're all one energy, then there's no real need for any protection. And so what I tend to tell my students is, if anyway you're erecting things, it's done visually inside your own mind. Wouldn't it be better just to change your thoughts about the need for protection in the first place, and just see yourself as being really safe, and use then your sensitivity to navigate with, to steer away from situations that maybe are unhealthy for you. And if you have to deal with them in the healing context, then to stand in your power and let energy flow and transform. I don't know if we've got time for me to tell a story about that, but I have a particular story. Maybe not. Maybe
as we're 18 minutes past, which means we're sort of 3 minutes past, and we've got a comment. But let's just read this comment from Leisha. If I felt like I needed to be protected, I don't think I would ever engage in Reiki healing. For me, it is about being open and trusting. If the intention is for the highest good, then there is no need for protection.
Yeah, very well put. Very well put.
Okay, but folks, if you're happy to hang on a little bit longer, as everybody seems to be staying, do you want to share your story?
Yeah, I will share the story. I came down from Findhorn to London to teach a course, and in Findhorn I was, having one of those days where I was experiencing myself as completely interconnected to everything, every flower, every tree, every plant, very, very much one with the universe. So I get on a flight from Inverness and I land in Heathrow, and about 2.5 hours later I'm heading into Piccadilly on the Underground, and the doors open and this man gets on, and you could feel the fear ripple through the train as he entered the train. And he had a big sort of ring through his nose, and he was tattooed, he was huge, he had blood all over his knuckles, and quite honestly was terrifying. Anyway, he got on this train and he sat right opposite me. And in my mind I thought, oh God, that's it, I'm dead. But I thought to myself, I wasn't feeling fearful before he came on this train. So how can this possibly be my fear? this must be his fear. So I endeavored to stare straight into his eyes and make contact with him. And when I did do, he blew a raspberry at me, which was the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. And I knew in that moment I was completely safe. Anyway, he continued to terrorize the rest of the train with songs and things he wanted to do to everybody. But he would keep coming back to me, almost to gain my approval. And he would say things like, so what do you think of that song? And I would say, well, I think you're really angry. He'd say, well, of course I'm angry. I'm an anarchist. You know, and then he'd go and do something else. Anyway, by the time we got to Piccadilly, I had his bloodied hands in my hand, and I was telling him he needed to go and have that looked at because, you know, he might get infection. And he was like a puppy dog, absolutely relaxed. He got off the train and he left. And in that moment, I turned and looked around the train, and everybody had looked at me like I had disarmed someone with a machine gun. And it was such a big lesson for me around the need for protection. Now, normally I would have avoided those situations if I could, but I was stuck in it. So instead, what I did was just stay in my power and looked at him straight in the eyes and recognized the fact that actually on some level we were one. He was me and I was him. And fortunately on that day, he decided to come over to my side.
But all he really wanted was for somebody to acknowledge him as a human being.
He just wanted some attention. You know, going back to what you said, it's like the inner child just wanted attention. It was behaving badly, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, this has been brilliant. It really has. And I have no doubt you and I could talk doing this for ages, and I have no doubt that the viewers would stay. But unfortunately, we do need to draw this to a close.
No problem.
So, folks, the Heart of Reiki. Now, I don't know whether that's going to pick up, and that looks back to front to me, so I hope it isn't on the cameras. The Heart of Reiki, Richard's book, absolutely brilliant. I would thoroughly recommend it, and I'm not being paid to say that either. I promise. I tend to be one of these people who's honest. I wouldn't be promoting it if I wasn't sure about it. And Rich, is there any last little thing that you'd like to share with our viewers before I have to draw things to a close?
Well, I think I've sort of summed it up in a nutshell. There's stuff coming up in the future. If people want to make contact with me, they can do it through the site. I think you're going to mention that. And there's a book signing, I think, in Ferndown at the end of the month, on the 30th of May. But no, just basically go out there and share it as much as you possibly can. It's a wonderful practice, and you know, make contact if you want to talk about things anytime. I'm always happy to respond to emails and share my experiences.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Folks, you will, the replay emails are no longer the way they were. I can't add anything to them. So please, you will find Richard's website address on the About Us page of the website, giftofhealingtv.com. And I will put it under the replay video, which will go up onto YouTube. I know that'll go up later this evening. I will put the website address under the YouTube video tomorrow. So please, you can connect with Richard via his website. If you otherwise, send me an email and I'll forward it to him for you. Yeah, that's not a problem at all. Richard, thank you so much. We've got a few thanks. Sylvie says thank you so much. Dawn says wonderful. Colette says thank you. So thank you so much for being with us this evening. It's a pleasure. Great pleasure. Next week, ladies and gentlemen, we are here as usual, 7:30 on Wednesday evening, and our guest is Holly Hallowell. Holly's going to be sharing crystal cleansing and a meditation to connect with your crystal. So I hope you'll join us, because I know there are a lot of people out there who love Reiki and also love crystals. So we're having that next week. So please do join us. And I'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Eloise says, thank you, Sarah Jane and Rich. You guys rock. Loads of love to everybody. Catriona, has this been recorded to watch again? Yes, Catriona, you will receive the link to the replay, and you can find the YouTube video. I will be posting that on the website tomorrow as well, so people will always be able to find that on there. So that's not a problem. Watch to your heart's content and watch this space. I know it won't be yet because we're pretty fully booked on Gift of Healing TV up to towards the end of the year, but maybe we can invite Richard back at some stage. So watch this space for not a rerun, but an add-on. That would be good. Take it one step further. Daphne says, thank you both, and to everyone sat at their computers. Lovely and special to be with you all. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, folks. Have a wonderful evening, day, wherever you are in the world. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. And thank you to our special guest, Richard Ellis.
Thank you very much.
Love, peace, and light to you all. Namaste.